I can't hear you.
Josh was just alerting me to the fact that I had mute on the entire time for my intro. So now we're back. This will not be edited because I'm too lazy. Unexpected points. Kevin Cole here. Josh Hermsmeyer here. Week 10 is in the books. We know everything now. Can we just give out the Super Bowls, give out the awards, give out everything else? We know that Shane Waldron has been exposed as the sole and only reason for Caleb Williams's struggles so far this season, which everyone saw coming this offseason when he had hashtag greatest supporting cast ever for a rookie coming into this year. We'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about some teams which may or may not be on our radar as better or worse than we think going forward. But let's start, post-election. I think we have to talk here. I don't have the transcript of what we talked about last week, but I think we nailed it, my friend.
Well, my guy nailed it, right, with the 65%. But, I was the one who was more, hey, the polls are saying it's a close one. But you know what? Honestly, the most likely version, the most likely, simulation that people thought would happen happened. That doesn't mean it was, terribly likely in absolute terms, but if there was polling error, and we thought there would be, we just didn't know which way it would go. That was the big discussion heading into the election, on the day at least, was it which way the polling error would go. And if it went one way, we would get if it went Trump's way, we'd get something that looked something close to this. And if it went the other way, who knows, maybe Iowa would be in play. So that was kind of the discussion. I think that polling is broken. I think that's fair. I think shy Trump voters is a thing. I think that's a fair critique. And I think non-response bias is a big problem.
Did you read the so let's talk about just quickly again. We'll have our whole full election podcast. We'll come back in 4 years. Just to talk winners and losers, like as you mentioned, some people might put Nate in like the loser bucket because he had his 50-50, but then he did have his most frequently modeled outcome was exactly what we ended up seeing. So like, I think people that were like, it's a close race. It's fine if you had that right now with the polling, which I thought was interesting. I think the winner here, and this is where I think Nate is kind of incorrect and some others are incorrect, is the doubt that's put on these prediction markets. And it shouldn't be that much of a surprise while there'll be less reliability in these markets than in a market where you're getting a lot more feedback, like NFL betting markets or something like that. You're getting a lot better information. There happens to be some signal there. And what I thought was interesting is you're mentioning polling is of course, this is after the fact. This was mentioned. So you never know like quite how these narratives are penciled in once you already have the results. But that the infamous Polymarket French whale, let's just call him Pierre. I don't know what his name is. He said that he actually commissioned some of his own polling where they were using what they called the neighbor method, the neighbor effect, the neighbor something, where instead of asking people who they would vote for, they would say, who do you think your neighbor is voting for? And they get a more accurate prediction that way because more people are willing to say that they think that their neighbor is going to vote for Trump than I'm going to vote for Trump, at least in certain neighborhoods.
I mean, my head's exploding. They won't even ask people who they voted for last election. A lot of pollsters, reputable ones, for years and years and years, because they were convinced that people misremember to an extent that it would bias the results. Doing polling based on what you think your neighbor is going to do.
Well, they're saying that you're actually saying yourself.
Insane to me.
You're actually giving you a window into what you think, but the shy, you're a little less shy to discuss what your neighbor, what Bob's doing down the street than what not that you actually know what your neighbors are doing. But anyway, so beyond that, what I can't say about polling being broken and where I think we did nail it was the Ann Seltzer, whatever her name is, that it looked absurd. The rationale was completely absurd of all these people saying, oh yeah, this is completely wrong, but it tells us something. And then she just like torched her entire credibility, which in my opinion, again, it's like, if we're talking about 5 or 6 different elections, we're basing how amazing these pollsters are based upon these 5 or 6 elections. We could just be talking about pretty good at flipping coins over the last 5 or 6 times also. So I think we nailed that one at least.
Yeah. I'll end with this. I have a take. It's not, terribly political. It's more tactical. So we've seen like the demise of Disney, right? When people started unbundling cable, right? So now you can, I think I read an article last night, in fact, about how people are pausing their streaming services. And so there's like this bigger retention than they thought. That was just all framed in a good way, that like, yeah, we thought we were losing 5% year over year. It's really 3% because people are pausing and then restarting and that kind of thing. But this idea that you're giving people more choice, right? They're going to make decisions that you can't predict sometimes. Well, when each state had abortion on the ballot as a proposition for people to vote on, they could kind of unbundle the Democratic Party platform, vote for the proposition that secures their rights to abortion, and still vote for Trump. And I think that was a tactical error by the Democrat Party.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was like 2022, because there's no Trump, there isn't that much of a force. But you're right. Normally, the theory would be you put this on the ballot, you get people to come out and vote who wouldn't normally come out and vote, who are for this measure, and then those people will naturally be voting against Trump. Well, it probably doesn't work as effectively when the turnout is just as high as it is anyway. That you're not really driving additional people to the polls. Okay, again, we'll put this on ice. We'll come back with our next version of politics talk for the 2026 midterms, or we'll just roll this into a weekly show. Herms will be back on Friday to talk politics. All right, let's talk something even more controversial and biased. That is the NFL season so far. Okay, let's start news. Shane Waldron out. Bears OC. The rumblings this week. Well, there's been rumblings about Waldron, I think, for a few weeks now, because again, things aren't going well. And then if you look on paper, you brought in all this receiver talent, you had decent O-line talent that has or has not been performing. And then you have a quarterback who was taken number 1 overall, who was seen as pretty solidly the number 1 prospect by most people. Again, it's a highly uncertain evaluation. So, and then we have a good start to the season. A poor start to the season, a good middle part of the season against some pretty suspect defenses. And then now the bottom has fallen out the last few weeks. What's you got any takes on this? I mean, I think from my general standpoint would be taking these jobs always seems like it's not the worst thing to do, because things will probably get better versus getting worse after someone gets fired. But I don't really know how to project this going forward. I think it's still going to be a little bit rough for the Bears.
Well, I have a question first before we get into what I think about Waldron and the choice to hire him initially and how he's performed.
Oh, yeah. How often does it talk about JT O'Sullivan? You can give me the whole breakdown of whatever videos he's put together.
He actually dropped the entire game yesterday. I haven't watched.
Oh, wow.
I haven't watched the whole thing, but yeah, he's been really, really carefully critiquing the Bears all season long. So yeah, he's got some takes. But how often does it work changing OCs? Like, how often is that a factor that leads to a turnaround in offensive production? That's a question I haven't looked at, and but my gut says it doesn't. It seems to be de minimis. Like, it's not. It's just an admission that things are broken and that probably won't be fixed, rather than any kind of actual change agent in terms
that would be my baseline assumption would be your projection, the actual results wouldn't differ from your like pre-firing projection. It might differ from your pre-firing results, which, again, the projection should incorporate some regression potentially if things have been going particularly poorly. I guess we don't have, I'm trying to think of a lot. I mean, an interesting example from last season would be when Dorsey was let go and then Brady came in for the Bills, where it was really everything but the offense that was a problem for the Bills, including a lot of just poor luck in losing games. And then I don't know if they got better, their offense, but I think it was roughly equal in the second half of the season. And then they ended up winning a bunch of games. So it was kind of like a win-loss. Results got better because they had the the unlucky side of things when they changed OCs, but I don't know if the fundamental core performance of the offense changed that much.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good example. I think they went more run heavy as well, if I recall correctly. They started using James Cook more.
Yeah.
Here's what
Shorter
they said.
passes, I think, too. Maybe a little bit shorter passes, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, and that carried over to this year when they lost Diggs. So here's what Eberflus said when he hired Waldron. He said it was an exhaustive search, that he was grateful for the journey, which of course, and it's all about the journey, and that he's a great teacher, communicator, all that. I, I guess I'm skeptical that it was an exhaustive search. First of all, I'm skeptical that they actually looked at the best candidates. And this is a retcon, right? Like I never thought Waldron was very great. I mean, people hated him in Seattle. I mean, he was never the top of the list of the people that I respect. But at the same time, I mean, there was a lot of people, as you mentioned at the top, that were very excited about this team. I mean, they thought, as you said, best situation ever for a rookie quarterback, and that Waldron was going to be the mastermind behind an offense that was going to be was going to take a rookie quarterback and really help elevate him. And again, you mentioned JT O'Sullivan. Anyone who has done a careful analysis of the Bears offense, who knows what they're talking about, they have like an endless list of just fuck ups and weird things that this offense does that is just inexplicable. It's just really hard to kind of square the circle with someone who is a good OC. So I don't think it's the wrong move. I think, like, for instance, I think he deserved to be let go. I just don't know how it helps you. I don't know how it helps this team. I think that the way that this team gets better is to work through these problems somehow and come out the other side. And I don't think, now they obviously won't have the opportunity to do that with Waldron. If you want to get into specifics of what people like JT say about what's wrong with that offense, happy to do it. But I notice your eyes glaze over whenever we talk X's and O's.
Yeah, well, we'll save that. I'll just add a link to the JT O'Sullivan podcast, and people can log off of this and go over there instead.
Well, no, it's actually paid, so I would be like spilling the tea. So yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So let me talk some Williams performance this year. Yeah, but I think you're right. Like the same thing I said when they did the change for the OC in Buffalo. If you're gonna say you can't project that it'll improve things necessarily. The flip side of that coin is you also can't be that negative about it, right? You can't be that negative about what will happen. You can't be that confident in a negative prediction, where I think sometimes we see that on both sides. If guys are let go, head coaches let go at the end of the season who people like, then they're thinking, oh, this is a horrible move and things will get worse. And my general thing with coaching is, we'll see. So if we look at Williams so far this year, so he played the Titans and the Texans week 1 and week 2. Really bad efficiency in those games, bad completion percentage versus expectation in those games. Next game was against the Colts, where it was kind of flat-ish. And then he had a 3-game stretch of positive efficiency, positive CPOE, which I think is important. And I want to discuss the accuracy component, because sometimes that can give us either contradictory or edifying evidence for what we're seeing on the efficiency side with EPA. So that number started to turn around. We saw the EPA number turn around, and people are like, oh, maybe we got something going here. Now, those were against the Rams, the Panthers, and the Jaguars. And we learned a lot about what I guess we kind of knew. The Panthers were pretty trash already at that point in the season. Rams also weren't playing so well. Jaguars might be the worst defense in the NFL, and that was his best performance of the year. And then the last 3 games against the Commanders, who are not great defensively, the Cardinals, who have been up and down, and the Patriots, who started off pretty good but haven't been really good since then. He's basically just flipped back to having the negative CPOE, the negative efficiency. And what I think is interesting, though, about the last few performances, right, where he's been bad, 0 picks. 1 fumble these last 3 games. So these like really bad numbers are not even being driven by high variance turnovers or things like that. It's just like fundamentally ugly offense that can't do anything even when he's not getting picked.
Not a lot of picks, but I think depending on how you grade these type of things, there were a lot of interception worthy throws, and there were a lot of tipped balls. So like I think the variance is
Yeah, I
just
mean, when you're that
the variance
inaccurate,
is
that's probably going to
there.
happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the negative variance is there. It's just manifesting itself in a different way. But I,
You
I,
could
I
say he's
think
gotten lucky then. He's gotten lucky to have this bad of performance.
there's definitely some negative luck regression coming. But I also think so. For instance, two Bears wide receivers were on my model this past week, and that usually points to an offense that is in store for positive regression. It just means that they just haven't been connecting at a baseline level, NFL standard level on offense through the passing game. And we've seen his ceiling. Like, and again, I said this in my write up. Look, quarterback growth is nonlinear. It's not something you would expect to continue in one direction at all times. We have seen his ceiling about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now. It was very good. It wasn't Jaden Daniels good, but it was good. And now he's back in this trough. And I think, maybe Waldron's job this year was to kind of even out that sine wave, and he just hasn't. He's actually magnified it. He's made it worse. So, yeah, no, but watching him play, and they align with the numbers for the most part. But I just wanted to point out that I think that his play's actually been bad and lucky in measures.
Now, also the some numbers that have been highlighted, and I'll dig into a bit here, is that I saw something. I forget who it was. It was like Kevin Clark or someone was saying, "Oh, you did all this, and you're putting him behind like the worst offensive line in the NFL, or worst performing offensive line." I mean, the numbers for the offensive line are actually like PFF grading is pretty mid. Pass block win rate is pretty mid. Nothing in my numbers that I'm running is looking at time to throw and other factors in there look like it's that bad. So that I'm just like, if we're looking through the litany of excuses that you may get for him, that's not so great. And his numbers, at least via PFF, when we're talking about when he's been kept clean, which has been 64% of his dropbacks. So, he's facing a decent amount of pressure, but he holds the ball. He holds the ball a long time too. His accuracy rate on this is maybe around 80%, a little bit lower. It looks like 75%. So he's missing his adjusted accuracy rate. It looks like it's 74.6%. So he's missing a quarter of his throws. Some guys are like near that level overall for their accuracy. So he's missing a quarter of his throws even when he's not under pressure.
Yeah, and to the Bears offensive line, they lost a lot, so it's a tough it's a tough situation. I have them in the bottom third of the league, but they're still better than the Seahawks. Geno Smith's passed for ungodly amounts of yardage. They're still, at least in my rankings, they're still right around with LA and Arizona. I don't like their line, and they've been fine. They've been serviceable. And as you point out, the pressure hasn't really been that big of an issue. I mean, the center is garbage, my gosh. And the guards, are hit and miss even on, pretty standard running plays. So I think the line is not great. This is not a good offensive unit. It's broken. That's another reason why I don't think an offensive coordinator really is going to do much to change this. You got DJ Moore taking every other play off, not really running hard, getting pissed off when he doesn't get the ball. You got the dusty zombie corpse of Keenan Allen. I mean, he's just, and then Rome, who everyone loves and everyone wants to see do well, because he's the hot new rookie. I don't think he is savvy enough yet for them to rely on. I think he's good at taking the top off, but they don't use him for that. He dropped a beautifully run stop route in the first drive of the game this week when they got the ball, I think at the 50. I mean, they scored 3 points, dude. The Bears offense scored 3 points and they started the game at the 50, their first drive. It's just, it's a disaster. It was a game that's going to get you fired.
What's interesting, we have a comment here that I wanted to highlight from One Man's Odyssey as the handle here. The problem with Flus and Waldron is they seem to not know at all their talent internally. DJ Moore playing X, while Dunze plays slot, while Allen plays Z. Kmet gets no targets, while Everett Lewis gets some. So what I think is interesting about this is it's not that
I just want to point out that that's JT's been harping on that all year. Just another plug for my guy.
The JT O'Sullivan. I need to break out of the echo chamber here. Okay, this is what I'll say to this, and this is also going to go into, like, again, the trademark best starting rookie offensive surroundings ever we had coming into the season, where, okay, results are bad, right? So when results are bad, we are more confident that if we change things, if we did things differently, results wouldn't get even worse because we're already probably on the bad side of the distribution for where things will be. So, like, theoretically, I agree. When you have something bad that's happened, you could say if we wouldn't have done what we did, things would have been better, is probably correct. But I just don't think two different things. I don't think is necessarily always correct. It could have actually been the right thing that they were doing. We don't really know that for sure that it's always correct. And number two is, if we don't know these things in advance as well, and maybe you could say that all these things were obvious in advance, and some of them may have been, some of them may not have been, depending upon who we're talking to here. But these are professionals. These are professional offensive coordinators who have a lot more insight and knowledge into the talent of what's going on there. This is their core competency, I like to say, versus us harping on like fourth downs and other bullshit is not really their core competency. That I think I also take it with a grain of salt and say, yeah, things maybe have gone bad, but unless we can really like predict well these things going forward and not just look back at what went wrong, it's hard to say. And when it goes to the narrative side of things, like you talk about DJ Moore, walking off the field on that one play and this and that. I mean, those are the types of plays where if you win the game and everyone's happy, no one even notices it. When things are going poorly, all of a sudden you start noticing these things a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree if it was just one play, but whenever he's asked to run a route for the love of the game, right, as they say, where you're not going to get the ball, but it's still important in the ultimate team game for you to do your job so that another guy can run a route that is actually going to put a defensive player in conflict, whatever it might be. But the point is that you need to do your job for everyone else to succeed. It might be a block. It might be how hard you run your route. It might be selling it correctly. It might be, whatever it might be. He has just not done that consistently week over week. And the common narrative for why he's been a malcontent this year is that he's coming off a year where he was getting peppered with targets and he's no longer the focal point of the offense. They drafted Rome and he's just not a happy camper, and he's making it known on the field, which is, you talk about professional. Well, these guys are not playing like professionals, Kevin. And so like, if you've lost your locker room, then no, you can't continue, right? In the same fashion, because we're talking about humans here. We're talking about people who, if you're wahing me every day, I'm just not listening and I'm not going to do my job. You absolutely do have to make a change at that point.
Okay. Herms, don't maybe put you in timeout with this lost the locker room coach speak stuff here. No, I agree. There's obviously an element to that. It's just how confident we could be, how much we can see into that. I don't know. Who would have thought that we would have said after Caleb Williams was drafted that there'd be a receiver who would be a malcontent because they're no longer playing with Justin Fields as their quarterback, and getting a guy who could barely throw for 200 yards a game is no longer there, and now you're dissatisfied. See, again, predictions, as what's the old quote, like, predictions are hard, especially about the future. So yeah, this is definitely one of those circumstances here. Do we, a couple people jumps back into my mentions about post week 3 when I said you had to take Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, even if it's a close call. The fact that people went apeshit crazy on that, I don't know. I don't know where I stand on this, but as far as looking at those two guys together, like the degree of confidence I have, obviously everyone is kind of in the Daniels bucket at this point. I'd like to be contrarian and say maybe there is a pretty good shot things turn around. We have Jared Goff, we have other guys where things turn around in their second year. But I still think post year 1, the common sentiment, if results continue in this direction for the rest of the year, the common sentiment is probably still going to be a little bit too positive on Williams's likelihood of turning things around. But I'm not sure. We'll see where that shakes out by the end of the season.
Yeah, I saw some comments, or at least I was sent some comments by various people, but just saying, it's so weird the production isn't lining up with this guy whose talent we're sure is this, and to your point, how sure should we be of our talent evals on anything, especially with quarterbacks? But I would say I want to keep coming back to this. We've seen his ceiling. His ceiling was pretty good. I don't care if it was against a bad team. Good players should run up the score on bad teams. We've seen that. I thought this week we would see a better offense, and we didn't. And when expectations are like that, are kind of, the opposite happens of what we expect to that degree. I think I have updated, and my new update is that I'm in line with you that Williams is probably not going to be much more than a mid-tier guy. That's the most obvious, most likely outcome now. He'll be a mid quarterback even when they get things straightened out. He's missing too many easy throws. He's not the mobile guy that people hope that would just, take care of plays when they break down. So that's where we're at with him, I think. Now,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels is probably not as good as everyone is hoping right now.
Yes.
But
I'll agree with that.
He is certainly, much more the odds-on favorite to actually have a top-tier career.
Yeah. It's that rookie quarterback evaluation asymmetry that I've talked about before, where if someone has a good year, people are like 99% sure they're going to be a franchise elite quarterback. And then if someone has a bad year, they're only 50-50 split on whether or not they'll actually be bad. One thing that's interesting about Williams, if we're talking about like narratives that I've seen out there, what is backed up by the facts on the ground here, the stats, the tentativeness of his play. I've heard people talk about that. And I mean, people probably figured this out, but I do think it's interesting that, like I mentioned, only no interceptions these last 3 weeks when things have gone down. Only one interception a few weeks before that. He had some interceptions earlier in the year. So very low INT rate, only a 1.7% INT rate so far this season, but leading the NFL in sacks and holding the ball for a while. So that's a combination of play, which I think can sometimes fool people into thinking that they're not as playing as poorly as they actually are, because the interceptions just jump out in people's minds so much. I mean, for instance, in the Sunday night game, Goff had 5 picks. Stroud had 2 picks. So everyone after the game is talking about Goff's 5 picks, Goff's 5 picks, Goff's 5 picks. He had 0 sacks. Stroud had 4 sacks. And if you look at the total expected points lost, if you bunch those together, was about the same for both of these quarterbacks. So, I mean, everyone thinks Caleb's a disaster kind of as things are going on, but I think in some ways it actually masks like, whoa, we need to be taking some chances here. And I don't know how you poke and prod a quarterback to be taking some more chances and getting the ball out of his hand a little bit quicker. Right now, it's a difficult thing to do, and it proves to be a lot stickier than some people think. They think they can throw some quick fixes into the offense. Sometimes it happens. Most of the time, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think what would argue against your interpretation of sacks versus interceptions is the amount of blame we place upon the quarterback for a sack versus interception. I think it's a little clearer with interceptions that either it was just they weren't on the same page, or it was his fault in the read, or it was a bad throw. And all those kind of point causally back to the quarterback. Whereas while we are in agreement that sacks are a quarterback stat, it's not the case that it's 100% the quarterback.
Correct. I'm weighing more like the perception of the blame that belongs to the quarterback for interceptions. Depending upon who you're talking to, it's probably like 90% in people's minds. And then for sacks, it's like 25%, where the reality is maybe it's like 80 versus 60 or something like that.
Agreed.
So a little bit more in the same bucket. Actually, this brings up an interesting thing, because as someone's mentioning, Herbert or Mayfield lived up to their rookie season. So Herbert had a big game. So shout out to Justin Herbert. And since you're our official Chargers whisperer here, I'll take credit for, I finally said, are we ready to call out Justin Herbert? And then he had his biggest game of the season. So congratulations, Justin. Thank you.
Look at you. I actually haven't watched the game. I don't know anything about it. So good for Herbert.
You just make something up. Come on.
Yeah, no. I was more concerned with Calvin Ridley getting his second garbage time touchdown to win the Millie Maker, because he was on my buy low. So
well, yeah, we'll talk about that. Ridley's been having some prayer yards up until this point, and looks like he was able to translate some of those. So appreciation to him. All right, so other teams that we're talking about here so far this season. Do we have anything to add to the Chiefs we had kind of a little bit of a Chiefs discussion. I think this game really brought into focus this idea that they're somehow like threading the needle and scraping by, doing as little as possible, knowing they can win games. I mean, they're really testing that theory with this one here, that they could just set up and wait to the last moment and then block a field goal in order to win games. People are mad. I'm a little bit surprised when I came up with my power rankings today, having them fourth in the power rankings. People are mad that they're not a bit higher since they are undefeated. I don't know. Am I getting sucked into the same trap that it was last season, where I was like, I don't think this team is really the Super Bowl caliber team we always think they are, and then they go on a run at the end of the season. So, do we have any updating on that from last week to this week?
I mean, I'm kind of with everyone. How can they keep getting away with it?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't have them as fourth. Like this Lions love, I see. Well, unpredictable. Once again, it's Tuesday, unpredictable. Whatever. The markets are the markets this early in the week, but they have the Lions as number one by a mile. I'm sure that'll come back to earth. But
Yeah.
after the stink bomb they laid, we're not going to have this as a close call. Like I don't know. Where do you have the top five?
I have Baltimore number one.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? I can go ahead and for the people who haven't seen this yet. So I have Baltimore number one, and then the Bills, that's probably a little bit shocking to some people, but by straight EPA per play numbers, they look pretty good this year, and their opponent adjustments haven't been that bad. Their defense is actually playing okay. Number two, the Lions barely headed the Chiefs at number 3 and 4, a slight drop to the 49ers, but basically nothing changed. Nothing changed over in that top five. And then as the deltas get smaller between the rest of the teams, there's been some shaking around week after week here. But that's where I stand. I admit that just by my gut, I would pop the Chiefs up above the Lions just so I can have like my three elite quarterbacks at the top there, and not not have to have a team whose numbers may justify it but doesn't have that same quarterback confidence.
Well, I'll channel Cade Massey and just say, we don't want to put our thumbs on the scale, but we have to put our thumbs on the scale. So yeah, I would encourage you to just go ahead and bump them up there.
Well, I put that in the write-up. I put that in the write-up. I want full disclosure. Here's my model, and then I go ahead and say where I may disagree with my model, and probably be wrong 49% of the time. Hopefully, is only 49% of the time when I change around things.
So I would put the Chiefs ahead of the Bills, and then I would go Bills and Lions, and then look, the Niners. I might
Good
be
game.
like,
McCaffrey's back. MVP McCaffrey is back.
yeah, the Vikings, I would put them below the Packers. Honestly, I would move up the Bengals.
People were mad.
Bit.
I used to have that. I used to have the Packers above the Vikings, but it's shifted a bit over the weeks. People were upset about that before, but now I agree. People are like wanting the Packers to be higher.
And look, I mean, how can the Vikings keep getting away with it? And then I don't buy this loss with the Commanders. I still think they're probably a just outside of elite team this year. I don't know how. And this is, they're probably the one I buy the most. That's unexpectedly in the top 10. Chargers, I think, are still a fringe team, so I think you have them about ripe. I think they make the playoffs and lose quickly. But I think that's a successful year for them. And anyway, so I think your power rankings aren't too bad, but I would just shift them around slightly.
Okay, I appreciate getting the not too bad endorsement from Josh Hernsmeyer. I mean, okay, so one thing I'll say, this is, again, when we talk about the adjusted score. So one thing to go for the Vikings, if we want to talk about the Vikings a little bit here, and again, they're playing the Jags with Mac Jones, so not exactly Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl here. But at least my adjusted scores, and most of the time the actual point differential versus the adjusted point differential, most of the time it narrows because the team that wins usually benefits from the high variance play, so then it narrows. So in this circumstance, it went from 5 to 12, so it expanded quite a bit. They were like vastly better than the Jaguars, which you would have expected. So don't get me wrong, it's not as if they were so outstanding in a tough spot, but I think it's things like this that are that are giving the Vikings a little bit more credit, because also, and I'll have to check here to see how did Darnold do in this game? He's about flat EPA. So he had like hugely negative with the INTs, which are in people's faces, but he's actually generating some decent amount of EPA. And again, he's like a top 5-ish sort of quarterback in my adjusted EPA numbers so far this year. So I don't know. It's a weird thing where to start the season, I thought Darnold was getting way too much hype for what he was doing earlier in the season, and there was a lot of hope built into that. But as the season has gone on, I don't know. I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with him. So maybe I'm not as skeptical as the Vikings as I was a few weeks ago. Well, it kind of seems like the general sentiment isn't as high on them because they have lost some games and had some close games against other teams.
It's weird. It's a weird thing with you because when the thing you predict starts happening, you're just immediately ready to move off of it because now it's obvious, right? But that you need to revel in the thing that you predicted happening.
No, we got to move on. We got to move on to the next topic that people will yell at us about. It's funny because I was talking about CJ Stroud earlier. Yeah, I had some people that were, someone was texting me saying like, "Hey, how come you aren't, victory lapping on CJ Stroud?" And I'm like, "We're on to the next quarterback." Then I'm going to say, it's overhyped. I got to keep going. CJ Stroud's probably a little undervalued at this point. Okay, so other teams to talk about here. Again, I'm going off of some vibes-based stuff from what the public is telling me. Do we have any hope that the Steelers, imagine or not, Steelers fans are mad at me for putting them at 16th, smack in the middle of the NFL? I guess technically in the top half of the NFL. What you say here, because according to my adjusted scores, they've actually been worse in a couple of these victories with Russ, including this last weekend against the Commanders. And it looks like they are 14th in the betting markets, 15th last week. You got any Steelers? Am I underrating Russell Wilson's potential here?
No, I mean, coming into the season, okay, so let's take our prior coming into the season. They were a bottom third team. This was not a good team. Tomlin Magic has asserted itself, and now their record is their record, which is insane. But even their core performance has improved over what we expected. So that's Tomlin Magic. He might be fourth down woke now. He was going for it. I think I don't know if it was on his 40 or was it plus 40, but it was a fourth down go.
Really?
If Tomlin,
I remember he was 2-point conversion woke a number of years ago because the kicker missed a couple of extra points and they started going for it over and over again. So I don't know whether that'll hold or not.
Yeah, but if he does become fourth down woke, look out, because he is, for my money, the best coach in the league. And if he actually starts playing efficiently, and I mean, he's always played to win. Don't get me wrong. He's the best at that, at pushing, I would say, coaching, tactical, human element edges. Like, he's just very good at all that stuff, the soft stuff. But if he can actually start embracing some of this other stuff, man, look out. The Tomlin Magic will be a force.
I love this Tomlin is the best coach in the NFL take, because I think it is like the best answer for who the top NFL head coach is, with the the overarching uncertainty that we have about these sorts of things. But the thing that I like about it is, versus an Andy Reid or a Shanahan or one of these other offense, or a McVay or one of these guys where we kind of point to the things that are going on the field somewhat, so then we feel like we can give them more credit because there's something like more tangible necessarily to what they're doing. The reality is, the difference that the head coaches are making are the things that we don't see, right? And the things that we can't measure in that sort of direct way. So for Tomlin, we have outperformance for a number of years, large sample, and most importantly, we have Hall of Fame quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger in that last couple of years where he could barely do anything. We have Mitch Trubisky, we got
Mason Crosby.
Yeah, we got all kinds of guys. We got Pickett. We got Pickett, Kenny Pickett coming in here. We got Justin Fields.
Yeah, Small hand Pickett. Yep.
And now we got Russell Wilson. Like we're starting to build up a sample of, in my opinion, the most like when we end up confounding factor that ends up throwing off our coaching evaluations, which is who's the quarterback, right? Like think of even Belichick, right? We don't even have any Belichick sample of doing well without Tom Brady, really, or outperforming without Tom Brady. We have all that with him, so I like it. Mike Tomlin, best head coach in the NFL, maybe one of the best head coaches ever. I think you can say that, and you can say I can't like actually specifically point to anything that makes it so, other than the evidence that we're getting and the confirmation that we're getting with the quarterback changes also brought into that mix.
Yeah, there is a graph. Mason Rudolph was who I was searching for there.
Mason Rudolph, yes,
There was a graph who I think it was Yurko. Ron Yurko posts on Twitter every once in a while, and it's basically EPA on one axis and then win probability added on the y axis, and it's always like Tomlin is outperforming the regression line, and people like Jim Harbaugh. So it makes sense. It makes sense. It's that type of coach. It just does the weird shit, like in his khakis and his belt. This is Harbaugh I'm talking about, sitting in the cold tub. So I mean, just weird stuff like that somehow makes a difference, I guess.
I mean, those two guys have shit tons of charisma. I'll tell you that. So whatever you might measure on that, they definitely have a lot of it. Okay, here's an interesting question here from the chat that I wanted to bring up because Hermsmeyer is being called out in the chat, and we have to acknowledge that immediately.
Okay.
Can you ask Josh, Mr. Running Backs Don't Matter?
Mm-hmm.
Are you Mr. Running Backs Don't Matter? There's quite a few. There's so many.
There are so many vying for that title.
Why the best two? Is assuming we're looking at free agent signings here in 2024, were running backs of Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. So number one, let's assume that you're not going to rank those as tied for number one for top signings of the offseason. But can we say those were great signings? And better yet, as part of that question, how do we actually disentangle like the performance of these offenses versus their personal performances and what we've seen so far this year? What do you say? Have you been proven wrong? Should we be spending big money on second and third contracts for special talented outlier running backs like we've seen this offseason?
Yeah, that's a good question. A better question is, if you draft a quarterback with a high pick in 1 year, should you then sign the running back you have currently on your team, Chuba Hubbard? Should you do something like that in season to reward him? And look, it paid off, right? The Panthers won a game on the back of Chuba. And
I feel like they just need to spend money. Like they have to spend money on somebody, don't they? Maybe they don't. Maybe I need to check their books to see what's going on over there. Is Tepper's money laundering or something through his running back?
I'm dodging here because like I'm of two minds on this. Like I have a fantasy football mind that wants to answer with, oh well, I have lots of these guys on my teams, and then like, what? I mean, is this real? Is this an actual question about like
how about this? How about
1 year sample and some dusty ass Georgia running backs? Like, this is a real question.
Okay,
like,
let's look at it this way. Let's say Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, number one. How impactful do you think these guys have been on their teams? Do you think one is impact as being they're both being overstated? One's more overstated than the other. One may be understated versus the other. How do you think about these guys? Because obviously Henry is more of the ground and pound type and monster efficiency, and I think there's like a chicken or egg situation here where people are trying to say that he's helping boost that offense up, and the offense is playing better. The passing offense is playing better. Everyone's playing better. But yet, is it really Lamar Jackson that's helping to boost him up? And the same could be said for the Eagles, right? You have the rushing quarterback there. And if you give Saquon a little bit more space, could this be like a synergy type of thing where the two things come together? You have the offense that gives them a little more space, which then allows their talent to flourish. So maybe, again, this would be the argument, which I think we've seen disproven probably too many times, but like in the right situation, the running backs can really be worth it because their talents are given more of a chance to flourish and shine with the space and the scheme and everything else.
Yeah, and I think I knew coming into the season things were going to be really good for Henry. I know Baltimore has lusted after him. I mean, when they lost the Titans in 2019 with Lamar pass for 500 yards in the playoffs and Derrick Henry stiff armed them into oblivion, they were like, that's the team we want to be, right? We don't want to be this 500-yard passing team. We want to be the team that stiff arms the other team, right? So, like, he is everything that Baltimore ever wanted to be. And to have him on their team and to think he wasn't going to be used in careful, smart ways effectively was a silly bet to make, I think. Also, I'm just still reeling over this Georgia comment. I mean, I know off the top of my head Saquon went to Penn, and I just looked it up, and yeah,
Alabama,
Henry went to Alabama. What do we even talk? What is this question? So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think that it is interesting.
It's not Georgia. I think it's meant to be free agent signings, but it's GA versus FA.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. You said Georgia, and I was reeling. So yeah, no, but like with Saquon, I don't think there were a lot of people who thought he was a great bet to do well this year. He hasn't looked amazing. The fact that he still has juice and can leap over people backwards, like it's pretty cool. I don't know. I guess we were all wrong. I think he was a second round draft pick in fantasy, so I guess people did think he was going to be, serviceable, better than some of these rookies. But in the past, when you have new guys coming in, new fresh talent, fresh legs, those are the guys you usually want to bet on, and you would think they would take over quicker than these older second, third contract running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to the pairing them with a rushing quarterback, enhancing like their getting an extra little juice on whatever sort of talent that they bring. At the same point in time, we don't want to overstate it. I remember when I was at PFF, and let me see, when would that have been? Because what draft was Jonathan Taylor in? I guess that was the 2020 or 2021. 2020. So he was in the 2020 draft. I remember that we were doing like a mock amongst all the PFF people, and no one's we did 3 rounds, and we're each taking different teams, and no one was taking any running backs. So I, at the end of the 3rd round, which I think it was a supplement, I think it was one of these the supplementary picks for the Ravens, because it was the Ravens. I was like, you know what, a guy who can run 4.3 or something like that with Lamar Jackson, that sounds interesting. Like I would go ahead and pull the trigger on that. So I have always been a little bit of a fan of, if you have that dual responsibility with the rushing quarterback, you can get something going. But at the same point in time, it does just enhance all running backs, right? It doesn't just enhance the guys who are seen as being superstars.
And to that specific situation, they found that exact guy in as a UDFA in Mitchell.
Right.
I mean, if he hadn't torn his ACL, that dude would be out on the edge, really stressing defenses out wide and opening things up for Lamar in the middle, just like they were doing at the end of last year. I guess he just came off IR, but I think they have something good going with Justice Hill. I don't think they're going to change things up too much this year. But the point is that you can find these guys. Let's reframe it, because I'm a little tired of running backs don't matter too. I think it was important to really get people's attention with the idea. So I think that there are ways. I fancy myself something of a.
Are we retiring? Marketer. Are we retiring the phrase?
I'm not retiring it. I'm just saying I don't think it's effective anymore. It's lost its effectiveness. So you should move on. You should move on to the next thing, like you said, with your takes. And as something, I fancy myself a decent marketer. I've started some businesses. I think that the new way to talk about it is they're all good. Like people have said this before, but I think they're ready to hear the message now. They're all good, and so. Just put someone in there and have a good blocking scheme and some good play calling and see what happens.
Yeah. And one of the funny things about the whole running backs don't matter battle on social media is that teams were already with us on the fact that running backs didn't matter, other than the occasional high draft pick. And even in the circumstances with these 2 running backs, the money being spent, while it's higher than you'd probably like, it's not. We're talking about guys who are slot receivers and tight ends and stuff getting decent amount of money when they haven't produced as that much at this point. Okay,
I feel like the analytics community sucks its own dick a little too much, and I think that
this is
there is more meat on the bone here. I think you can continue down
Does that go
this
back to
running backs.
dick?
This running
There's no
backs
more
don't
meat on the
matter.
bone. Okay, I don't know where we're going here, Herbs. I
Yeah,
might have to
no,
mute
to
you
turn into
pretty
a
soon.
porn podcast. So what I think you can continue down this road and realize more edges, and more equity if you just continue to do less than what the NFL market is doing in terms of re-signing guys, drafting guys. I think there's still more to do here.
Okay, this is an interesting question here. How many lame duck staffs are there so far? So he's putting Mike McCarthy, Eberflus, the
Dallas.
Flus for sure. So those two are listed. Let me just go ahead and bring up a
Off the
list
top of my
of.
head,
Let me go ahead and bring up the.
the Raiders. I might be
That's
looking
an
bad.
interesting one because he's
The
still
Saints.
relatively new. I remember Antonio Pierce. He needs that money to pay these
His
like
his
$1 billion
wife's
in
bankruptcy.
tax.
Yeah, his
In
wife's
tax.
bankruptcy is not his wife's.
All right, so let me bring up some so we can at least see some of these potential options here for teams, and by records will help look at this here. So who could be in trouble here? Okay, we were Jets we've already seen this happen. Patriots, no, they look pretty good. Dolphins, just new contract for Mike McDaniel. Although I feel like if he didn't sign that new contract, who knows? There could have potentially been some issues there. Now, if they fall apart, could we have Zach?
Have we mentioned Jacksonville yet? I mean,
No, that's a good one.
top
I
of the
kind of
list,
forgot
right?
that he hasn't been fired at this
Yeah.
point. That Dougie hasn't been fired, so he gone, right?
He gone.
So he gone. Supposedly, for the New York Giants, supposedly the initial word from Mara, the owner, is that he doesn't want to shake things up too much. I was talking. I had some mentions. Someone was asking me about like defending Dable versus some others. I don't know. Like, I'm fine with getting rid of both of them, but I'd probably say Joe Shane in the front office would be the first head to roll. And maybe there's some hope for Dable if you bring in, more talent or different talent there.
Yeah, their first year with Dable, it did a number because of the way Shane handled the DJ contract. And I mean, it was very predictable that you're going to get Dayball in there, and that DJ was going to do better than he had before because he was going to mash all the easy buttons. I'm speaking of Dayball, and he actually called some great games. Him and his OC called some great games that first season that he was there. From an analytics perspective, he did the opposite of what you would expect, and that's usually deception's usually a good thing. And then after that, they thought they had the winning combination. That's usually a recipe for a disaster. So I would agree with you that Shane is the one that needs to go there. We mentioned the Jets, of course. That's obvious as well.
Yeah, we've already had a decent amount of movement here. Could there be any surprises?
The Saints is one. I think it might be more of a surprise.
Well, the same. I mean, he's already been he gone there. So like we have to figure out who's gonna step in there for the Saints. As far as next
you don't
season
think it's going to be Rizzy? I don't think they're going to Riz it up for the rest of the next couple of years. I don't know.
The plumbers would not be happy about that. How about like out of nowhere, like Callahan getting fired from the Titans or something? Is any possibility there? I don't know. They seem lost.
Too much love.
Probably not though. Yeah, Antonio Pierce. The thing I don't get about what's happened in I was about to say Oakland, in Las Vegas is like, what's the plan here exactly? I guess they're still kind of digging out under the mistakes of the past regime, bringing in Devontae Adams to add with Derek Carr and all that before they fell apart. But it was a weird kind of sideways move this year for a team that wasn't any good anyway. Like they kind of had no hope going into which would have been, I realized he wasn't the head coach all of last season, but he had some tenure there coming into this year. They kind of just decided to do nothing.
How long does Mayo have? Does he have one more year?
I assume he signed at least like a 4-year deal or something. So this is.
Oh, no. Right? I'm not talking about the contract. I don't.
How long does he have to go? I don't know. They're fine. Drake May looks okay. So I think they're going to be okay there, which is interesting. I guess Eberflus is maybe a dead man walking. It's interesting though that I'm looking at here that their point differential is actually +8. so far this season. Like, they're not that bad of a team. It is a little bit like expectations may have gotten out of hand for how good the team was going to be this year based upon the defense being so good the second half of last year.
Well, I
But
mean,
yeah.
there's bad and then there's how you're bad. And again, I think this is one of those situations where our numbers miss a little bit of just how dysfunctional this whole thing is. And it's been that way, right? People have not been happy with the way the ship has been run in Chicago for years. And so I just feel like they're on their last nerve, everyone involved, the fan base as well as the front office and the people, decision makers and owners and things. So I think that one is a powder keg that, yeah, could go either way. I could see them sticking with Eberflus another year, and I could see them blowing it.
All right. This is interesting. Talk about Zach Taylor a little bit. So let's take this last question, and then if some others pop up, I'll read them. Otherwise, we'll get out of here. So this is an interesting one. So it says, can we put any hope into the inherent consistency of offense and inconsistency of defense to allow the Bengals to squeak into the playoffs? I.e., can the Bengals defense rebound just enough going forward?
Yes.
I mean, I would say yes. I was also saying yes, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. What they have going for them, though, is the AFC being so meh this year that even at 4-6, they're not really out of the playoffs by any stretch. In fact, to make the playoffs right now, let me just bring this up to check to make sure. So they're plus 130 to make the playoffs. So if you just straight up convert that to odds, that puts them at a 43%. Now that's a little bit of juice in there. So let's just say a 40%. They still got a 40% chance to make the playoffs right now, despite the fact that they've been losing some games they should have won. So I agree with you. I think they might be a little bit underrated, and yeah, something could potentially turn around defensively.
Yeah. No, I think hope is something you should have as a Cincinnati fan. Obviously it's easier to say that after, your number one wide receiver goes off for like, Nintendo numbers or Madden numbers.
And they lose the
But
game, but yeah.
yeah, but you still you see the silver lining here. You see the explosiveness of an offense that can carry you. I don't think anyone in the AFC wants to see them get in the tournament, and that is probably the biggest compliment you can give that team.
Okay, you want to talk? Air yards?
Oh
High
no, I
low?
just mentioned it'd been 3 weeks since we'd gotten a guy on the Millie Maker winning lineup, and we did it again. So that's good. So I like to, it's been it's funny, like, you start out, you're doing this kind of predictive stuff, and you start out really good. It's always better to start out hot, right? Because then you can pimp it, you can market it. You say, hey, look how great this is, and this is going to end, and then it's going to suck, and then and though it finally did end after 5 weeks, a great run. And then 3 weeks go by, and then you start thinking, will it ever happen again? Is it broken? Do I need to rejigger? And so, and then of course you don't. You just stay the course, and then it happens again, and you feel a lot better. So I'm feeling a lot better this week. I'm looking forward to my write up this week. And go ahead and go to substack.airyards.com to check that out, and hopefully help you with your lineup decisions.
One thing I was going to ask you that came to mind when I was thinking about this phenomenon of being hot at the beginning of the season, potentially, and then maybe cooling off a bit later. Is there something to the signal that you're getting from unrealized air yards? Is there a higher likelihood that you're going to hit on someone early because maybe there's more variance in the fact that they're not realizing those air yards? And as we get further and further into the season, we start to realize that, these guys are just going to continue to be, the redacted guys that are going to get listed off the list. And they're just not going to realize those air yards because there's something more fundamental than just poor variance in their results.
Definitely there's some more of that, but it's a rolling 3 weeks. So you're basically looking at a window throughout the season. So it's different in that regard. But I do think, I think what happens is each week you carry forward a subset of the people who didn't hit the prior. And if they are any good, they will eventually hit, right? Because that's just the nature of it. And then the ones that stop seeing opportunity fall off. And so what we had was that there was a week, I think it was last week, I had two two guys who actually played. So the list was 4 long. One of them got injured. One of them I just keep on there to mock Tyreek Hill. I just think he's trash, and I won't write him up. He's also always rated too highly for me to even have him be on a buy low
4
list.
targets last night. I don't know what's going on with him, but go ahead.
Oh, he's got a torn wrist tendon or something like that, right? So I think when you see that happen, when you see that kind of winnowing of the list down to just that few possible candidates that fit the profile, then you really can't put a narrative to it that no, we just all the guys that were gonna hit, and we got to let this window move another couple of weeks and get a new batch in here.
All right. Well, check out Josh's work, Air Yards, Substack.com, mine, just unexpectedpoints.com, also hosted over at Substack. Power rankings out today. I'll have all my quarterback information out later this week. Probably Lamar Jackson jumping to the top of that adjusted number. I'll be glad to have a season where Lamar wins MVP when he's number 1 in EPA per play, so we can have that harmony back together, as opposed to people saying it's just a win-loss type of a narrative award. Although they'll continue to say it next year as time goes on. But I appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll be back at you next week. Enjoy the Thursday night game. The rest of the games there, and all my write-ups will be sent out at you. Thanks so much, everybody.